mode.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, evening, whenever it happens to be, wherever you are. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be doing a customer webinar where we're going to be talking with Dustin from Eastview Christian Church. Dustin's on the line with us here, so say hello to the nice people, Dustin.
Hey, how's everyone doing today?
And we're going to talk about Meraki in general for a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the specifics of how Eastview Christian Church has implemented Meraki, what their network challenges were, how they've used Meraki to solve those challenges. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But first, I just want to give everyone a quick refresher. For those of you who are new to Meraki, quick intro on Meraki, what we do, what we offer, some of the solutions we provide. So first things first, what are we going to go through today? Well, like I said, I'm going to talk about Meraki. I'm going to talk about what we do, what our products are, what our offering is. Then we'll dive into Eastview Christian Church and how they've deployed Meraki and what they've been able to do with it. We'll get into a demo where actually Dustin was kind enough to let us demo their network today, so we're going to look at their actual live network. And then we'll talk about some of the products that are available, the product families that are offered by Meraki. And then at the end, we'll get into Q&A. We've got a couple folks from our marketing team here with me. I totally forgot to introduce myself, sorry. My name is Joe Aronow. I'm with the product marketing team. I've got a couple other colleagues here who are going to be helping out and answering questions as we go through the session in the meeting session. But generally, there are at least a few questions that we really want to answer, for everyone, that are really useful for everyone to hear. So we'll try to get those in at the end, and then anything that comes up at the end that hasn't had a chance to be answered, we'll go through that as well. So first things first, you are eligible, if you're an IT professional, to receive a free AP for this webinar. So please do check into that. Meraki.cisco.com/free AP is where you can see the eligibility information, and it comes with a 3-year license, full featured, no limitations, so free gear, nothing wrong with that. So please do check into that. In terms of getting your contact info so that we can get this out to you, make sure you reach out to your rep to confirm your shipping address and contact info. You can find info for your rep in the webinar reminder email. So let's talk about Cisco Meraki. First things first, what is Cisco Meraki? Well, we refer to ourselves as a cloud-managed IT vendor. So what we're offering is a suite of networking products, IT products that are managed from a cloud interface, and that's called the Meraki dashboard. And that's what you're going to see in today's demo. When we get into the dashboard, you'll see that interface that I'm talking about. We have a wireless product line, a switch product line, a security product line, and an MDM product that's a little bit different because it's purely software-based as opposed to having a hardware device associated with it. So this cloud management concept came out of a project at MIT years and years ago called RoofNet, which our founders were involved in. And what they were trying to do was blanket Cambridge, Massachusetts with free wireless. And this became very problematic because it was a team of a very small number of people trying to cover this entire city, and their physical install base was huge, but their installation team wasn't, right? They had to find some way to bridge that gap. So they needed a way that they could just give these to colleagues, other students, staff, faculty, have them set them up on roofs of their apartment buildings, whatever it was, and create this wireless network without them needing to go and manually install this gear, and without them needing to go on site to configure or troubleshoot the gear. So the way they solved that was by creating this centralized management system that they ran kind of out of their housing that connected to all of these devices and communicated with all of them so that they could configure them remotely, they could monitor them remotely, right? And the deployment stage just required someone to go and physically put the device there and plug it in. And that model is what eventually has kind of evolved into what we have today with the Meraki platform, which is a centralized cloud-managed solution where the devices are put on site, they're plugged in, they're given internet access, and they go back to this central cloud controller to fetch their configuration, and you can do all the monitoring and management, sorry, I had a little moment there, from that cloud interface. And like I said, you're going to see what that looks like when we get into the demo. We've got ton of customers using this technology. A lot of them tend to find, from what I've heard at least, and we'll talk to Dustin about his findings, that the centralized management and the remote management capabilities are a big part of what they love about it, and how simple it is to use. That's the other big piece, is kind of making network administration and IT management more accessible, because it's a very intuitive interface. It's all GUI based. There's no command line. So it's very easy to just pick up and use if you have an understanding of the networking concepts behind it. And that can be very, very valuable, especially when you're in an organization that has a pretty small IT group trying to manage the network that is very resource-strapped and has to get a lot of things done very quickly. Why cloud networking? What's the value of cloud networking? I've touched on it a little bit just in terms of the scalability of management, the centralized management, but I want to talk about how we actually accomplish some of the stuff I'm talking about. Because I can say, you know, it scales, you can manage everything in one place, that's all well and good, but how do we do that? Well, we do that with this cloud infrastructure. So we have our Meraki cloud, and all Meraki devices worldwide talk back to a facet of this cloud. We have data centers all over the world, and the devices will talk back to the cloud via their respective local data center, and they'll ship down configuration information, pull the configs down from the cloud, and they'll ship up monitoring data, metadata that you can use to see what's going on in your network, see what clients are connected, what kind of traffic they're passing, other information about the network. So that's the communication between the cloud and the device. The other side of it is the communication between the cloud and you, the end user. And the way that that takes form is through the dashboard. So the dashboard is your portal into the Meraki cloud. And that's what we'll be looking at in the demo. So a few kind of bits and pieces of the mechanics of this, important things to understand. One is we have full redundancy within data centers and between data centers. So if a server goes down, we have that data replicated. We can fail over within that data center. If the data center goes down, we can actually fail to another data center. So we have a couple different layers of redundancy there. The two biggest questions that I get asked about cloud management in general that come up all the time, and you can kind of see them on this slide. One is, what happens when I lose connectivity to the cloud? That's a huge one. And the answer is the devices keep doing exactly what they were doing before. They operate on the configuration that they had when the connection to the cloud got interrupted. They keep running, keep serving clients, passing traffic, everything that they're supposed to be doing. And then when they're reconnected to the cloud, then they go and check and see, oh, are there any new configuration changes that I should implement? And if so, they implement them. The other cool thing about this is that they will actually locally buffer any of that monitoring data I was talking about, so application visibility data, for instance. They'll buffer that locally on the device so that they can ship it up and backfill that time period in the cloud dashboard. So you won't have this big gray section of a graph that says, hey, we don't have any data because we were disconnected from this device. We'll actually retroactively go back and fill that in, which is quite nice. The other question that comes up constantly is, well, I don't want, not a question so much as a statement, I suppose, I don't want my traffic going through the cloud, which is a totally valid concern for security and privacy reasons. And the good news is it doesn't. We don't send end user traffic through the cloud at all. We have no interest in doing so. It presents all of these security, potentially bandwidth limitation, privacy concerns. You know, we don't want anything to do with that. So the actual user traffic goes to the device, be it a wireless access point, switch, security appliance, goes to the device and then goes out onto the network, to the internet, over the VPN, whatever path it would normally take. The only thing that's going between the device and the cloud is the management and monitoring, or as I like to call it, command and control traffic. And all of that passes over a secure encrypted tunnel. So it's just configuration coming down from the cloud to the device and monitoring metadata being passed from the device up to the cloud. You can find out a lot more about compliance, reliability, security information at meraki.cisco.com/trust, things like PCI, SSE 16, HIPAA, other compliance information there. So feel free to take a look if you are interested. So what are we trying to do with the solution? Like what problems are we trying to solve out there in the industry? Because at the end of the day, if you have a solution that doesn't solve anyone's real problem, it's probably not going to do too well. You're not going to get a lot of kind of investment in that. So what we're seeing in the industry is that there's a big change in the last 5 to 10 years, and a lot of it's being driven by two major things, in my opinion at least. The idea of the smart device or the handheld internet device, which of course is everywhere, phones, tablets, all kinds of laptops being probably the first example of this, all kinds of devices that people have with them pretty much all the time and expect to be able to get to the internet all the time. The other piece to this is a lot of applications that both are very bandwidth intensive and potentially may actually be important to your organization. They may be mission critical to whatever you're trying to do. So it'd be one thing if all the bandwidth intensive applications are Netflix, right? Because then it'd be a lot easier to differentiate. But sometimes those bandwidth intensive applications are actually being used heavily. YouTube may be used by a marketing department, right? Dropbox may be used by any part of an organization. So being able to kind of be aware of and control some of that application layer data and figure out what's happening on the network and what can I do about it, and is it a good thing or a bad thing, is very, very important. And the video and media kind of plays into that, right? That's one of those very heavy, bandwidth intensive and performance aware or performance critical pieces where if your network performance starts to falter, it's one of the first things that you'll see affected. And in a lot of cases, especially with collaboration, things like WebEx, other collaboration software, Skype, for instance, it's very important that that functions well on your network. So what we've done to try to address some of these challenges is try to put all of the information that you need. First thing for any problem is knowing what the problem is, knowing what's happening. So try to build all of this network and client visibility into the management portal. So you have the ability to do things like see what kind of applications are being used by what devices on the network from the dashboard. And then the next piece, of course, is being able to act on that. So doing things like creating firewall rules at layer 7 to block applications, creating bandwidth shaping rules, creating quality of service or prioritization rules, right? All of these pieces. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do around managing, monitoring, controlling the traffic that's going through your network. And then with the MDM component, the Meraki Systems Manager product, you can also get into controlling your endpoints, controlling your devices, things like point of sale iPads or any kind of managed device, right? So you're managing it at the network level and you're managing it at the device level to give you this kind of holistic view of everything that's going on in the network that's all monitored and managed from one place. That's the core value of Meraki. So with that, I'm going to unmute Dustin real quick so he can give us some feedback. And we're going to talk about what Eastview Christian Church has kind of done with their Meraki solution and what challenges it's addressed. So first things first, Dustin, I would love it if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about your network. And I've got a slide here, but if you could kind of go over, your organization, your network, what kind of challenges you guys have faced over the last couple of years.
Sure. So we are a non-denominational Christian church here in Normal, Illinois, and on a Sunday service standpoint, we average somewhere around 6,000 people in attendance in and out of our building on any given Sunday between our 4 services. Our staff environment looks like we have about 70 full part-time staff currently, and then from an IT standpoint, it's really just myself and then our network admin that manage all the devices on the network, along with the fiber backbone that covers our over 200,000 square foot building. So we have a large campus. We are single campus only. We don't have multi-campuses. Little background, when I first came on staff 5 years ago, we had just a networking infrastructure nightmare. We had all different types of manufactured switches. We had individual areas of ministry putting up their own Wi-Fi, and we're broadcasting about 4 or 5 different SSIDs that were all just kind of plugged into the wall, and people were getting access to the internet. Just a real spaghetti mess. And so our first project, when it came to infrastructure, was trying to centralize the Wi-Fi. And so what we did is we looked at several vendors and really just landed on Meraki and thought, you know what, this is worth a shot. Let's see. I really like the dashboard, and that's what sold us. And so we implemented about 12 APs and got our primary spots of the church, primary common spaces with Wi-Fi with Meraki APs. And from that point, just kind of fell in love with the dashboard and what we were able to see and how easily we were able to configure it. For us, only being a 2-man shop, and I'm not by any means a real command line type of person, my staff and myself and my network admin, more of the type of individuals that we know what we need to do on the infrastructure, but we may not know the command lines to do it. And so the dashboard really made that easy for us to know what we need. We knew what we need to do. It's easy for us to go in and actually make those changes and configure the network. So started with APs, and then we slowly started moving into the switch environment. We needed to replace some old switches. Thought that we loved the dashboard and what it had from an AP, from a Wi-Fi standpoint. Started slowly bringing in a couple switches at a time, a couple more switches at a time, and really we were hook, line, and sinker from there, because for us to be able to see and configure our APs and our switches all on the same pane of glass, same interface was a huge deal for us.
Great, and I think that's kind of a common thread that we hear is, especially for folks like yourselves who are a little bit more IT resources, you don't have a huge team of CCIEs to manage the network, right? You've got a couple guys who are very dedicated but have only got so many hours in the day. That's really where a lot of this stuff shines.
Yeah, absolutely. And then once we implemented the switches, then we needed to, at the time, a couple years later, we needed to replace our firewall. We first implemented an MX80 security appliance. Quickly, we maxed that out from a traffic standpoint and moved to an MX90. All at the same time, we were also using the device manager, the MDM product. And we've been using that for, I think, almost over 4 years now. We've been using the mobile device manager, and that's been a huge advantage for us just from a deployment standpoint. One of the things that we see just huge time and support savings for us with MDM is that, for example, if someone here gets a new phone or a new iPad, they don't even have to bring it to us to get their Microsoft information pushed to the device. All we have to do is we tell them to go download the System Manager app. If they're here at the church, they just click on, they just connect it to the Wi-Fi. They click on our BYOD network, and it automatically sets it up in the System Manager for us. If they're out of the office, then we can give them our System Manager code. They plug that in. It automatically shows up on our network. We assign an owner to it, and then based on the profiles we've set up, it just automatically pushes all their Exchange, email, contacts, and calendar to their phone or to their iPads. So that's been just a huge time saving. No longer do we have people come to us say, "Hey, I got a new phone," and there's someone in my office. Anymore, we'll get an email, or even if someone comes to my office and they say, "I got a new phone," we'll just say, "Hey, download the System Manager app, and we'll push your email to your phone shortly."
Yeah, and I think you guys are a great example of what we like to call, and you can see actually for those of you who are looking at the slides here, the Meraki full stack. That's kind of our term for having the whole suite of Meraki solutions. And you guys are a great example of this. You have all 4 of these solutions, and you get to manage them all through that one unified interface. And I like that you're talking about kind of the value of Systems Manager, because I think people sometimes forget, because it doesn't have a physical hardware presence, that there's enormous value in the MDM side of the solution as well, especially when you've got it in the same interface, right? You've got it all in the exact same place, so you don't have to go and find another portal. I wanted to actually, there's a question that just got put up for me about moving from the MX80 to MX90, and you sort of touched on, you kind of outgrew the MX80, but can you talk a little bit more about that? What was that process like? What was the decision-making process about, okay, it's time to move to the MX90?
2 things. We were implementing an off-site disaster recovery project and solution with another church, and so we were implementing some of our hardware at another church, and we needed to set up we wanted a hardware VPN between our DR site and our primary campus here, and so at the same time we wanted our firewall to have a fiber channel, and so the 80 didn't have the fiber channel, and the 90 did, and so it was just good timing because we were going to buy a firewall for our DR site anyway. So we took the MX80 we had, we moved it to our DR site, we bought the 90 at our primary campus, turned them on, hit one button, and we automatically had a hardware VPN already set up for us.
Great. So what are your kind of plans looking like for how do you expect to continue to develop this network? Because of course you're really done with network management. There's always more. There's always more things people want out of it, more things you can do with it. So what are you? Do you have any future plans to expand the network? What are you thinking for next year, next 2 years?
Yeah, we're in the middle of doing a point-to-point Wi-Fi solution with some Meraki outdoor APs, where we're extending our Wi-Fi network from our physical building out to our athletic fields, which are several hundreds of yards away and across an entire sea of parking lot, where we're taking an outdoor AP on the building and broadcasting it from with a point-to-point antenna out to our sports fields, so that one offer Wi-Fi signal out in our athletic fields, and we can also install PoE cameras out in our fields. So that's one of our big projects right now, and then we just continue to as the building physically grows, and we just continue to grow our infrastructure also. But the outdoor AP is definitely our biggest project on the books from an infrastructure standpoint this year.
Got it. So let's take a look, since you were kind enough to actually let us demo with your live network. Let's take a look at that. And Dustin, I'm going to kind of let you guide me to where you think the interesting bits and pieces are here. But there's one thing I wanted to point out right off the top, which is this first landing page, this organization view here. Let me expand this out. So we can see here we've got our map. Let's drill this in a little bit. And we can see that we've actually got something going on here, this big red icon. And if we want to, this is telling us that in this area, this network here, something is not functioning properly. So we can go over to devices, and we can sort that and see, okay, we've got a couple of APs that are down. So just a good example of kind of the quick and easy ways to jump into this dashboard and immediately start getting use out of it and just get a view of what's going on in the network. But I really want to let you drive, Dustin, in terms of where we should be looking, what you think is interesting about the network that's worth taking a look at. Let me jump into the Eastview network, since that seems to be where most things are happening.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that comes right to mind, I mean, I could talk for hours about any different or all the different facets of it, of the different hardware technologies. But if you, for example, go to like our switches and pull up one of just any of the switches for that matter. This is, and maybe other products have this, I don't know. At least our Dell infrastructure and our 3Com and HP infrastructure at the time didn't have this. But if you go to like show port list on any switch, you can see the current traffic of every single port on that switch. So for example, we had a situation where for about 3 weeks in a row, our network would just come to its knees about the same time every Sunday morning. And obviously Sunday morning is a big deal for us. And so we had a hard time initially trying to figure out what was going on, because we thought it was internet-based and not network-based. What we come to find out is one morning I hopped into our switch and I began to walk the traffic stack of our infrastructure. So, for example, if you look at this screen right now, you see the current traffic, and then you can see what's on the other end of that network port. So, for example, yeah, any of those. Click on any of those that go out to another switch. So now we're hopping out to the other end of that SFP, which is now we're on our 0007 switch, which is in a completely different network closet. And now once again, port list, I can see all my current traffic. So what we were able to do is we found, through walking this tree, we found a Mac Mini that one of our staff had, that they got in and they woke that Mac up at 8 o'clock on Sunday mornings, and for 3 weeks in a row, that Mac something on it or something on the NIC was dialing out to the internet and eating up about 20 meg a second. And so we were able to do what we just did, and you can see that on like port 20 where it says Geek Room AP. If that was a actual hardwire computer, you would have a link over to that computer, and you'd be able to nail and go right down to the actual computer that's tied to that, and then you would see all the details within Systems Manager of that client also. So that's a huge benefit. Another one, if you go up to clients, if you go up to network-wide clients, and let's say, why don't you search for, let's see, do like Mac or MM. So like, let's click on that client right there. So now within the client level, if I was at a desk and all of our stuff is labeled with the names on the front, so if I'm at someone's desk and I see it's MM142, I can do a search for that, and now I can go and I can see what port it's actually plugged in the network closet, which switch, and which port on that device, along with the bandwidth usage there. And then another thing that we've used this for is when we migrated. So every device that comes in to Eastview, the first thing that we do when we set that new computer up or that new device up is we install Systems Manager on it. And so when we migrated from Office 2010 to Office 2013, what we did is we searched our entire infrastructure for Microsoft Office 2013, like we're doing here. Now this is at the client level, but you can actually do this at the organizational level. And we found devices that we forgot about that still had Office 2010 on it. So it was able for us to do a level of like software inventory to be able to determine which of those clients were still out there that we hadn't. Yeah, here we go. That we still had the old version of Office installed on it. So yeah, here's a full software inventory of every piece of software installed on every client that we have the Systems Manager installed on. It shows you how many installs, the versions, and if you click on the actual software, it will show you the actual computers list that software is installed on. So this was a huge deal because we thought we had everything, but yet because we're about 50 people part-time, 30 people full-time, everyone has laptops, and so laptops leave and are at home, and we just forgot something. So we were able to come in here and say, oh, you know what? Jan's computer still has Office, 2010 on it. We need to call Jan and get her in here and make sure we get that upgraded for her. So this was a huge time saving and help for us when we were doing that project.
Great. Let me jump back over to the Eastview network here. And actually, I noticed you've got a Z1 in play here. Can you talk a little bit about how you're using the Z1 teleworker unit?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple. We have two Z1 units. One is at my house, and one is at another staff member's house. And we have those implemented just so we can have hardware, VPN direct access into our network, so that when I'm at home, I don't have to launch a VPN client. I can just turn my laptop on, connect to my Wi-Fi, and I'm on the network at home as if I were here. And the VPN setup is literally, the hardware VPN setup is literally point and click. You click one button, I believe, and it just makes a connection and the VPN set up. So we have two Z1s that are set up in that very similar manner.
Yeah, what I'm looking at here, for those of you who are watching on the session, this is the monitoring page for that VPN that Dustin's talking about. So the MX and Z1 products have this very unique, what we call auto VPN, which is a cloud-managed or cloud-brokered VPN where the tunnels are built directly between the devices, but all the information that's used to establish those tunnels and figure out what to connect to is all sent down by the cloud to all the individual devices. So this is the monitoring page that shows those connections and shows some information about connectivity to the cloud. And then what Dustin was referring to when you actually go into the configuration is it's very, very quick and easy to configure. So from the 0 point of, oh, it's disabled, we turn on VPN, we make a couple of decisions about our topology, what subnets we want included, we hit save, that's it. That's the entire VPN configuration. You do that on 2 or more MXs or Z1s, and you've got a tunnel up in a matter of seconds. So it's really very powerful and scales very well when you're trying to do this, at scale with a bunch of different devices. It's very, very quick and easy to knock those out. So Dustin, anything else that you want to add or that you think we should look at while we're in here?
Just to reiterate, just everything in one interface was just a huge deal for us. Being able to see Wi-Fi, our switch infrastructure, our firewall, and our and the MDM all in one interface has just been a huge benefit for us. You only have to learn one thing, and if you know what you need to do, the interface is intuitive enough that you can figure it out really quickly without any training.
Great. So we will probably end up diving back into the dashboard a little bit, potentially when we get into the Q&A, some of the questions maybe about things that we'll jump back into. But for now, we're going to hop back into the slides, and like I said, we'll probably come back to the dashboard toward the end. So I want to talk for just a couple minutes about the products that Meraki offers. Dustin, since Eastview uses all 4 product lines, he's kind of covered each of these a little bit, but we've got the MR access points, which of course, since we started out with that RoofNet project back in about 2005, 2006, wireless is our original product line, so it's our oldest product line. The MR access points are kind of the descendants of that original product, or original project, rather. And we've got a whole suite of different access points, 802.11n, 802.11ac. Some of the newer ones are also Bluetooth low energy capable. There's a lot of cool functionality built into that, but real true enterprise grade access points with that cloud management piece integrated into them. The MX, which is the product that I work on personally, is our security appliance. The Z1 is kind of in this family as well, but it's what we call a UTM, or Unified Threat Management Appliance. So it's a firewall with a lot of other functionality built in. You saw that Meraki Auto VPN, which is one of the key features of the MX. It's also got intrusion prevention, it's got layer 7 firewalling, it's got URL content filtering, it's got malware protection. There's a bunch of functionality kind of bundled into this device, and it works very well, partially because of that Auto VPN feature. It works very well for distributed branch deployments especially, or anywhere where you just want to have one unit that covers a bunch of different security features, or a bunch of different security needs. The switches are arguably the most recent hardware line. They've been around for several years now, but they came a little bit after the MX. And the switches are really interesting to me because I understood immediately when I was a Meraki customer before I came to work for then Meraki, now Cisco, and I got the concept of cloud managed wireless very quickly because I was used to the idea of controller based wireless, and I said, okay, the controller's in the cloud instead of on my campus. Great. Makes perfect sense. I got it somewhat for security as well, because with security, consistency is so important. You want to make sure that your security is consistent across all your locations, or you want to make sure you don't have to buy 8 different devices to accomplish all your security needs, having to have an IPS device, having to have a content filtering device, a edge malware device, firewall, all this stuff. Unifying that into one and then managing that from one unified portal made sense to me. I didn't fully get, it didn't click for me what the value of a cloud managed switch was right on the face of it until I started playing around with it in the dashboard. And actually, I'm going to jump back into dashboard from it because there's something that I want to show. Dustin mentioned a couple of really cool things you can do with the switches and kind of more broadly with the dashboard about tracing through the network. But one thing that I absolutely love about the switches, and I think this is the true differentiator, the thing that we do better than anyone when it comes to switching, is managing switch ports across multiple switches. And that's what's called the virtual stack. And what it allows you to do is we've got almost 900 switch ports here. And if we go to the switches page, we'll see that Eastview has 21 switches. And across all those 21 switches, I can make changes to ports across switches very easily. I can grab this guy, and then we'll come down here, grab this guy. I can grab these ports here. I can go through all of this. I can grab a bunch of these different switch ports and figure them all at once. Just hit this edit button, and you can see if I were hypothetically to make a change, it down here says update 10 ports. So I can update 10, 50, I think the max limit is 200 ports at a time across, in theory, 200 switches, as many switches as I want. And that's very, very powerful, especially when you couple it with the search function where I can find specifically certain ports. I only want access ports in the gym, and I only want ports that are negotiating at, I don't know if it'll like that now. It doesn't like negotiation. All right, fair enough. VLAN, if I can type properly, which sometimes I can, only VLAN 5, and I've got this one port. So it's very, very easy to find the ports you want to modify, and then just hit the select all and modify them. In this example, it's kind of silly because I only have one port, but if I remove this piece, and I say I want all the ones that are on, let's say VLAN 140 instead, and again, I can't type the word VLAN for some reason, you'll notice these are on 3 different switches. I can hit edit and modify those 6 ports across those 3 switches with a click. I mean, it's really, really powerful. So I'm now done with my spiel about the virtual stack, so we'll jump back here. In addition to that, there's layer 2 switching, there's layer 3 switching. The layer 3 switches have OSPF capabilities. There's a lot of, standard kind of switch features and some pretty cool, unique switch features as well built into these products. But to me, the number one thing that differentiates them from any other switch on the market is that virtual stack. Finally, last but certainly not least, we have Systems Manager, the MDM product, which is, as I said, a little bit unique in that it's a software offering. There's no hardware device because the hardware device for Systems Manager is a tablet, a laptop, a phone, a device that's owned by the user or owned by the organization that you're then managing with this product. And again, it's all in that cloud dashboard. We saw some of this when we looked at the software inventory, but in the same way that you go into your dashboard to look at your hardware devices and you can see all the clients on the network, with Systems Manager, what you see on the clients page is you see all the devices you're managing through this solution. So it's very, very powerful. It's got a ton of different features, especially for iOS and macOS, because Apple has done a great job of providing a lot of kind of MDM APIs for those operating systems. So there's a lot you can do to lock down devices, manage devices, geofence devices, create different security and network policies, and you can actually integrate that back into the network stack, because you can apply what we call group policies on the MX and MR lines that are traffic, security, and access policies based on the labels or descriptions for those devices in Systems Manager. So if you have a bunch of iPads that are listed as library iPads and you've got them labeled that way in Systems Manager, you can actually create a policy at the security or the wireless level that only applies to devices that are in Systems Manager with the tag library iPads. So very, very powerful integration piece there. One of the final things I want to mention is we try to make it very, very, very easy for you to get a hold of Meraki gear, because we really feel that it's one of those proof is in the pudding kind of things where I can talk about it until I'm blue in the face, and I frequently do because I really like the sound of my own voice, but nothing that I say is going to make anywhere near the impact of you actually going and trying this, playing with it for yourself. And you heard Dustin talk about, when they started really using the dashboard, that's when they kind of fell in love with Meraki. So I highly encourage you, meraki.cisco.com/eval is where you can go to find out more about our evaluation program. We make it very easy. We ship it to you. We ship it back. You get to play with this gear. You can evaluate any of our products. We really want you to try it because we do think that when you try this, for me at least, it was very much oh, this is what's been missing. This is something that I wish I'd had my entire career. So it's very, very powerful that way. We also have a free trial support team that's dedicated to the evaluations, and they're phenomenal. So they can help you with, how can you use these products and how can they address some of the needs that you have in your network. We also try to keep the pricing very simple. So the licensing is all-inclusive. Licensing includes support, warranty, feature updates, firmware updates, everything's included. One enterprise license that you get that gives you cloud access and all the associated pieces. There's no additional licensing you have to purchase incrementally for any of the various parts, which is very, very nice. Keeps things simple. So with that, what I want to do is get into the Q&A piece, and I'm actually going to run this a little bit kind of as a back and forth radio, just because of the fact that I've got the questions here in front of me, and a lot of them are for Dustin. So Dustin, you're going to be jumping back in here. I'm going to ask you some of the questions that we're getting from the attendees, and just feel free to, if there's anything you want me to show off related to this in Dashboard, just point me toward it, but just, talk about some of the stuff that people seem to be curious about. And the first one I've got here is how many APs are in the auditorium at Eastview, and what kind of bandwidth do you see in that location?
Yeah, so our main auditorium seats about 2,700, and if you go to our wireless and you go to the maps, you can see there, right there is our auditorium map, and so you can see that we have 5 APs that are actually in the auditorium, and then we've got some out in the hallway there. So that AP that says it's a 6, 22, 21, 16, 10, those 5 are in the auditorium. Those are the only ones that are actually in the physical space. And so on a Sunday, peak service for us is probably our 9:45. We'll have somewhere in the lines of 500 to 600 devices on those 5 APs. In terms of bandwidth across, it's really hard to say how much bandwidth, because it's really, honestly, it's church service, and so most people aren't sucking a lot of bandwidth down. They're just making that initially. Most people are making that initial connection, pulling out their Bible apps, and so where we see the biggest load is typically when our senior pastor comes out to preach and he says, "Take out your Bibles and turn to," and then bam, then you've got about 300-400 people all hitting and connecting all at the same time. It's the biggest load. But if I had to guess an average, we're just talking, probably like 10, 15 meg, honestly, across that entire trunk line of those 5 APs. Not a whole lot of bandwidth.
Okay, great. Next question we've got is, how did you decide which specific Meraki APs to go with?
Yeah, so we got several Meraki models and took them through an entire on-site proof of concept. We actually did the same thing with Ruckus at the time, and took a couple of their different models also. And we basically picked a model based on where we were putting it and how many people, how dense that environment was going to be. And so kind of our model is right now is that we put an MR34 in any space that it's going to be extremely dense. So our 34s are in all of our large auditoriums. So we've got you can see in the gym we have a very large gym, and that's where our junior high and senior high meets. So we have 2 MR34s in there. That gym is actually a 4 basketball court gym, so it's a huge space. And 2 34s can handle that space. The sanctuary is a 34. That's an auditorium, and that seats about 800. And then we've got the large auditorium, and what we've done with the large auditorium is we put an MR34 in the center, and then we've tied on MR24s, a little bit smaller models, in addition to the 34. But keep in mind that 34 hasn't been around very long, and we've had those MR24s in the auditorium before the 34s ever existed. So, long story long is that for us it's all about density. How many clients we envision connecting. If it's a heavy populated common space, then we're going to go 34. Otherwise, if it's a passway, if it's a hallway or a passway, then we're going to go with a 16.
Great. I got a follow-up question, which you may or may not be able to answer off the top of your head, but what's the approximate size of the auditorium?
Oh, man.
Totally understand if you don't know.
Yeah, I have no idea. All
right, fair enough.
I will say that we did tone down the power bands on our APs, because our APs, we don't have 5 APs in the auditorium for coverage. We have them in the we have 5 in the auditorium for number of clients connected, if that makes sense.
Sure, just to distribute the client load.
Exactly.
So another question I got here is, what kind of switches are you using in terms of layer 2 or layer 3 switches, and why? So let's jump over to switching, and you can talk about that a little bit.
Yep. So we have a little bit of a mixed bag, but now we've been a Meraki customer for 4 years, so models and stuff have changed. So we basically have our core switches, which are the MS420. The 2 MS420s are our 2 core switches, and so the entire fiber backbone today plugs into that MS 420 24 port switch. We're in the process of setting the 24 port and the 48 port up into a high availability failover configuration. We just haven't got there yet. So that's our core, and that's what runs our layer 3. And then after that, even though we have some other layer 3 switches, they're only doing they're not handling layer 3 routing. The only layer 3 routing we're currently doing is at the core level. Everything else is just layer 2 stuff.
Got it. Okay, so I've got a question that I think I'm going to answer a piece of, and then I'm going to throw over to you, just kind of about the structure of the network. So the question is, why is there a single Eastview network here instead of being broken up by APs, switches, security? And I'm going to answer kind of a piece of that in terms of just the broader Meraki and dashboard structure, and then I'm going to throw it over to you to talk about what you think, what you like or don't like about this unified structure. So from the Meraki perspective, it actually used to be that you would have a wireless network with all your APs in it, you'd have a switch network with all your switches in it, and then you'd have your security network with your security appliance in it, and you'd have that at every site. And we moved to this, what we call combined networks, or unified tabs is another term that we'll sometimes use for it, because we felt like you should be able to manage your sites. Manage the device, you want to manage the site and all the devices in that site. So the goal here was to say, okay, we've got this location, and all the switches, all the wireless, all the security for that location should be managed in one place, and that also means that you can view data about it in one place. So when you go to clients, you're seeing the wired and wireless clients at that location. So that's, from our perspective, that's kind of the goal here. And then Dustin, I'd like to hear from you. Has that been valuable to you? Do you like that better? If you want to say no, I liked it better the other way, totally fine too. I just want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so obviously we've been a customer for a while, and so when we were first Meraki customer, everything was separated. It was all based on basically type of device. Our MS was in a separate network, our MX in a separate network, Wi-Fi, system manager, all separate networks. And then when we combined them, I'll be honest, I hated it. I was just frustrated. I didn't like it, but I will tell you now that it is just so much easier. I remember it didn't take me long to love it, all combined, to the point where you can do what you just said. It's everything related to this location. It's wireless. It's wired. It's all my clients at this location. I don't have to say, okay, I want to go do a switch, and I'm only getting my switch information. I can also get my MX information, my security appliance information within the same network. So, and I think initially I didn't like it just because I had grown so accustomed to loving the way it was before. But it saves so many clicks actually within the dashboard when everything gets combined. So now what we do is, if you look at our network, we have the Eastview network, we have our DR Peoria, which is our disaster recovery network. And so that's another physical, different location. And then we have multiple device manager networks. We have it's called our device manager network, and that's an MDM network that we use. That's where all of the church-owned devices land. But then we have a BYOD, and that's where all employee-owned devices land. And then we manage those, and we have profiles set up differently for each of those device manager networks.
Great. So I want to highlight something. I've got time to take a couple more questions, but before we do, I want to highlight something that I've been kind of doing while Dustin's been talking that some of you probably noticed that I think is a valuable thing to point out. A lot of the kind of data tables in Dashboard are structured in this model here. It's called a Flexday. It's a really cool design element. And some of you may have noticed that as Dustin started talking, specifically when we were looking at the switches and the APs, he started talking about the models and layer 3 routing. I just started moving these around to consolidate that data. So one of the cool things that I really like about this is you can add and remove various columns, you can sort by various columns, and you can actually reorder them to create kind of a dashboard that shows you what you care about. So since I was doing that in the background, I didn't want people to be confused about what I was doing. I wanted to unpack that a little bit. So finally, I think we're going to take a couple more questions here. Really good question. Does any audio equipment, VoIP or anything else, rely on your Meraki network infrastructure?
Almost all of our audio stuff does. So we just recently migrated our audio system over to our Meraki infrastructure, and so we do have our audio system running over our Meraki hardware. Now I don't know the details of how the devices actually work. I know how we configured it on our network side, but yeah, all of our AV guys have recently moved their audio stuff onto our network, and it's now all IP based over our infrastructure.
Great. So final question, and then there's one more that I'm just going to answer because it's more of a question about the technology. But final question, actually, looks like both of the ones I have left are technology questions at this point. So let me dive through those real quick. One question we got is, do MXs repeat? And I think what the question is on the wireless side, like the MXWs and the ones that are wireless, with the Z1 as well. Did they participate in the Meraki MR wireless mesh? Do they repeat the signal? They don't. They're intended to be more standalone units. For instance, with the X64W, which is kind of our standard small branch wireless integrated unit, the idea is you'll get a 64W if you only need one wireless point of presence. You only need that one access point, and you can cover, a small office with that. If you're going to need more than that, you're going to get an MX64 non-wireless and MRs to go with it. The MRs do have a repeating and meshing capability where, for instance, if one of the wireless access points doesn't have the ability to get out over the wire to the internet, either because there isn't a cable, like you can't cable to that location, or the cable has failed or something's gone wrong, it will fall back to repeating from the nearest available access point that's got good signal. So there is a kind of repeater capability built into the wireless access points. Final question that I think we're going to answer here. I got a question on VPN between sites when they don't have static IPs. And this, I really want to dive into this a little bit because it's one of the huge values of that auto VPN that we looked at. So the auto VPN, when I say that it's cloud brokered, what I mean is it's IPsec VPN, but all the bits and pieces, all the crypto maps, all the IPs to be used, all the keys, everything is negotiated by the cloud. And the cool thing about that is, if a device has anything change, it reports to the cloud and says, hey, my IP has changed, or this thing has changed. And the cloud goes, oh, okay, and just broadcasts that information to all of the other MXs or Z1s in that VPN. So actually, you don't need static IPs at all, and you don't even need like dynamic DNS or any of the other associated technologies you would normally use for something like this. It'll just self-heal. It'll adjust, because anytime you have a dynamic IP that changes, or you fail over, let's say, from one uplink to another, because all of the MXs support dual ISP, if your IP changes for any reason, the device just tells the cloud controller tells all the peers, they reestablish the VPN. So you don't need static IPs. It's all based on kind of that device identity within the cloud controller. And then the IP is just a piece of information that's exchanged around, almost like a dynamic routing protocol, right? There's an update that's sent out to everybody. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I really want to thank everyone for taking the time to join us. And Dustin, I really want to thank you for not only joining us, but of course, giving us a lot of great information about your network, talking about how you've implemented Meraki, helping us to answer some of the questions that people had. So thank you for coming on with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet, absolutely.
And for everyone who is attending, again, thanks for coming. Hopefully we got to all of your questions. If we didn't, please reach out to your rep. Make sure that you get any questions you have answered. Feel free to reach out as well to us on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. We've got presences on all the various social media platforms. And don't forget to reach out to your rep as well to confirm your contact info so we can get you that free AP. And again, contact info for your rep will be found in the webinar reminder. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.